Welcome to the Great Honey Podcast. I'm Maya, the Amaryllin Bee,
I'm Marcelle, the Gleeman.
and this is a show where we talk about all things Wheel of Time. If you're joining us from YouTube, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Leave a comment so we can keep chatting. What are we doing today?
We are talking about Eye of the World, the first book of the Wheel of Time series.
It's such a big change for us. It's like
I know.
a whole new style of show.
It's a whole new world, really. In a lot of ways, it is kind of a whole different animal to tackle. But
Yeah.
it's kind of fun to get back into the books because it's been a decent amount of time since I've read these ones. But I did reread some key aspects of this book before this, so I think I'm good. Hopefully.
Yeah. And just a spoiler warning, just for anybody who's reading along with us, we're talking about chapters 1 through 10, or if you're in a current read, you have to be reading along with us because I don't know which chapters we're going to do next week yet. But
Right.
Yeah, so just chapters 1 through 10 of the Eye of the World. Anything in that is fair game in this episode, and we will try to stick to that as best we can.
Yep.
Which shouldn't be too hard.
No. This is just the introduction to our main characters mostly, and kind of setting up basically the world, really, is kind of what we do here in these first 10. So not a whole lot to spoil here, but yeah, I don't know. So do you want to kind of get going just a little bit with your impressions on, getting into the world? Like, I think we were talking about beforehand, before we got onto the podcast, about the prologue and how if you get through the prologue, it's a little bit of a haul because it's unique because it's so bizarre. You really don't know what's going on, and in fact, the person that you're in the head of, the POV character, is Luce there in Telamon, and he doesn't really know what's going on. So it makes sense, but it also is very confusing.
Yeah, I mean, the prologue is basically about a man who can channel, and he has gone mad, and you find out that he killed his wife and children and all of his inner circle closest friends. And then when a figure who we're not necessarily sure who he is explains to Luce Theron what he's done, he goes berserk and turns into a volcano. And that's
it.
That's how you get introduced to the story.
Right.
I remember being extremely confused, and I kind of just was like, all right, I'm just going to go through the prologue. I feel like with prologues, just because of reading a lot of books, they usually don't make any sense until a long time. So I kind of was just like, I don't know what's happening. So
right. It's funny. It's kind of how I thought of it too. Once you get into it, I was just like, okay, this is either just a huge info dump, which it really wasn't. I mean, I guess it was in a way, but it was more of just setting up the sort of dynamics of the world. And I think as you go on, you kind of understand. And it seems like even in these first 10 chapters, you get an idea that, men who can channel are to be feared. And this guy can clearly channel, and whatever the effects of that channeling led him to kill his whole family. So I think even at that point, I was kind of like, okay, this is what happens if you can channel in this world. And you don't really get much more information from that you can really, handle at that point. But yeah, it's definitely a unique intro, and it's tough. It's a tough haul for people, but trust me, just get on through that, get through that, and then into the story proper, and you'll be very grateful.
Yeah. And the shadow fell upon the land, and the world was riven stone from stone. The oceans fled, and the mountains were swallowed up, and the nations were scattered to the 8 corners of the world. The moon was as blood, and the sun was as ashes. The seas boiled, and the living envied the dead. All was shattered, and all but memory lost, and one memory above all others, of him who brought the shadow and the breaking of the world, and him they named Dragon.
And it came to pass in those days, as it had come before and would come again, that the dark lay heavy on the land, and weighed down the hearts of men, and the green things failed, and hope died. And men cried out to the Creator, saying, O light of the heavens, light of the world, let the promised one be born of the mountain, according to the prophecies, as he was in ages past, and will be in ages to come. Let the prince of the morning sing to the land, that green things will grow, and the valleys give forth lambs. Let the arm of the Lord of the dawn shelter us from the dark, and the great sword of justice defend us. Let the dragon ride again on the winds of time.
I don't know. I also just love folk tales in real life where like living things turn into trees and
Yeah.
mountains. And so I think I remember reading it and it made me think of this story. I'm from Michigan, and the story of the sleeping bear sand dunes, where it's
Yeah.
like a mother bear who's like grieving, waiting for her like drowned cubs, and the like sand dunes are like the bear sleeping. That's like, I don't know.
Huh. I've
Yeah,
never heard that.
so
That's
I don't
interesting.
know. It made me think of that. So I like it made sense in that way to me, but at the same time, I was like, I don't know what I just started reading. So, and then like the beginning, the next, so like pivoting to like the opening chapter of The Eye of the World, it kind of pivots to a whole different setting and a whole different time
Right.
age that like you
I
kind
don't
of
know if
just
they
like,
give an exact amount of time, but
yeah,
it's thousands of years,
yeah, time
from
has
that.
passed.
Yes.
Yeah, and you're, yeah, it's like a different place, different class of people.
Right. You get this sort of again, this, and we should just say that Robert Jordan, the author, when he wrote this book, this was, obviously well after the Lord of the Rings had been established, and he definitely was using that as inspiration. And this world, this immense field that we get here is, not really, it's not, so similar to the Shire from the Lord of the Rings books or the Hobbit, but it definitely has that sort of feel to it, right? You get Tim and Rand walking down this road, the Quarry Road, as it's called, bringing I think it's the brandy, right? They're bringing for the celebration, the winter
Mhm.
celebration. And while there is some sort of spook sort of thing that happens where Rand thinks he sees cloaked some cloaked I don't know, or I guess ruffian or someone who just is watching him. Even though he gets spooked by that, that quickly is kind of put aside. They get to the village, and it's just picturesque, sort of like everything's great here. We're doing the festival. Everyone's happy. The problems are very mundane that people are having. And I love, that was kind of what I kind of liked. I don't know. There's criticism because it's so similar to the Lord of the Rings, especially this first book. But I kind of felt comfort in that because it's hard for me to get into a new book. And so when I read it, and I was just like, I liked Lord of the Rings, obviously, and this just kind of worked for me. So I get the criticism, but I think it was useful to get into a new story to kind of get people familiar with everything.
Yeah, what's the blurb that is like on all of the books? From the New York Times, Jordan has come to dominate the world, Tolkien began to reveal. I feel like that's
Right.
kind of like how it feels in the beginning with like the mountains of mist and
Yeah.
like, yeah, the villagers getting ready for a party. It's obviously like it's
It's so
the
close.
Shire, but it's not the Shire, but it's like a whole different adventure, but kind of like that same like, I guess like formulaic beginning,
Yeah.
like that like hero's journey kind of. So it also reminds me of the beginning of Star Wars in a weird way. At least like if you go
Yeah.
in chronological order in episode one.
Right. Right. Yeah, definitely. I think there's something about the introduction of the characters. Like, we're basically in Rand's head for pretty much most of the book. But as he's kind of engaging with these the people in the village. The first thing that kind of struck me is like the interactions with the people in the village, where the women like immediately like Tam and Tam and Rand need to be married soon. And it's established that Tam has his wife had passed away some years before, and it was kind of weird because it's just like, who cares? I kept thinking that when I was reading it the first time, just like, why do they care so much? But it's just like
They're
I don't
two
know, it was a weird dynamic.
bachelors.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was kind of like me trying to understand the world, but also I knew that there was this dynamic of the women in this, the women in this book in particular having more power than is normally depicted in the world. And so maybe that's why I kind of keyed in on it. But you get introduced to that dynamic where the women have a lot of say over things, and when things are out of order, it does seem like, especially in this village, the women have a lot of a lot of sway over fixing those or remedying those things. And it was just interesting how that is introduced immediately. It's just like he needs a wife. That's what's wrong with him. Which is pretty interesting. And you get the women's circle that's also introduced, in which even though Tam, I think, is part of the council, right? He's the village council, which is I guess just men. They are kind of subservient to the women's circle, which takes precedent, which is helmed also by the wisdom, who is Nynaeve, which we get introduced to here too. So yeah, I think that was really well done. At least kind of eased you into it a little bit,
Yeah.
which was kind of nice.
Another thing I think that's interesting is just setting up that like Rand and Tam don't come into Emmons Field that often. Like they live outside and kind of come on special occasions. And
Yeah.
this particular occasion is Beltane, which is their spring equinox type celebration. Kind of just like celebrating the end of winter and kind of bringing in spring. Although this is kind of a weird Beltane for a lot of reasons. Like it's still very cold and no like sprouts have come up yet. And then there's also all these weird strangers coming in to town.
Yeah. Which I think is definitely, so at this point, it's just so you already have an idea of the cloaked man that Rand sees, where the cloak isn't stirred by the wind. But then the fact that both Rand's friends, Matt and Perrin, have also seen this cloaked figure, and all three of them confirm it. You start to be like, okay, this is what's going on with this. And then you also have these other people who are in the village, particularly Moraine and Lan, who I guess they're considered initially as someone who's just a lady of note, of rank, or something like that, is just collecting stories. Then you have her, basically Lan's just her guardsman or her armsman. And then you also have a Gleeman, Tom Marilyn, who's there, and you also get Pat and Fane. These are all different. Pat and Fane is actually a peddler who, I guess comes more frequently, but it's still out of the norm to have new people there. So you have all these different factors kind of making this a different sort of, festival than they're used to, at least in that sense, which I guess, as the reader, you start to, like, what are these building aspects? You kind of get some faint news from the peddler where, Pat and Fane is saying that Gildon has, they're talking of war in Gildon, and because a man has proclaimed himself as the Dragon Reborn, which we understand is now a bad thing to do, right? If you can channel as a man, as is illustrated in the prologue, it's a bad thing. And if you claim yourself as a Dragonborn, that's even worse. So that's a big stir and cause for a commotion amongst the city. So things are starting to get it's escalating ever slowly, even though we're expecting, this is just a simple town. It's starting to build the momentum a little bit.
Yeah, the big fear of there being a dragon reborn is there's a chance that you might be at the end of an age where the world might be broken.
Yeah.
That's kind of like what they're afraid of.
Yeah.
But it also is like there's been a lot of false dragons too. And so it's also like a kind of irritating and scandalous thing across
Right.
like the whole realm, right?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, when a false dragon proclaims himself, they don't always channel, but when they do, it's more scary because people, even though they want to just consider it a man who can channel, who's just crazy, right? There's always probably a faint fear that it is the dragon reborn and that the end of times is here.
And so I guess all of these kind of stirrings up, trying to figure out what to do about the news Padon Fane is bringing, the strange guests coming to Emmons Field that nobody, this is usually a place where no one goes to. The council all meet and kind of discuss if they should do anything, should they care. Tam has been kind of pretending to not really be concerned about Rand's cloaked man that he sees, but really he is kind of worried. And something that comes up in the council meeting kind of just has him being like, nope, we're going home. No winter night for us, which is the eve of Beltane. And Rand's like, oh man, and they go home.
You kind of get that sense too, because like he kind of does seem like, when you go over to your friend's house, or when you were a kid and your parents would take you to your friend's house or something and they were friends. It's that I kind of always felt like that. It's just like, well, geez, I gotta go home now.
Sorry to bring up Star Wars again. It's like Luke Skywalker, I was gonna go pick up power converters.
Exactly. And you kind of get that sense too that like his, Egwene, he's got, Rand's got a thing for Egwene, and I think he hates the fact that he can't stay in the Two Rivers or in the in Emmons Field with the rest of his friends and the the girl he's got a thing for. But I think Tam makes the decision to leave and to go home for the night. Which, as we find out, might not have been the worst idea. Though maybe it was actually. I don't know. It's like he was right to be worried, but also maybe he shouldn't have left. I don't know. But but yeah, so Rand and Tam go back to their home after dropping off the brandy. And this is kind of where they set up their they're setting in for the night. And you get this sort of like really kind of quaint moment between Tam and Rand where they're just it just seems like such a almost want like a full chapter of that, honestly, just to see, just after everything. I just kind of would like to sit in that moment because it's just so comforting, and it's just
it's just like cottage core perfection.
Yes. The stew is like on the fire, and like there's bugs. Yeah. But that's abruptly turned into chaos when Trollocs burst in.
And what is a Trolloc?
Yeah, I guess we should say a Trolloc is essentially a huge man a huge man sort of fusion with an animal, many animals in some cases, but usually they are about 7 to 8 foot tall. They range and vary. Sometimes they have horns, but they're always sort of like hulking figures. Usually they always act at the direction of a fade, or essentially I think they call them the actual name of them is the Murdrawl. And usually Trollocs follow what the Murdraws ask them to do or command them to do. But Trollocs are notable for their hunger for humans. And what's kind of creepy about them is, it's known generally, but Trollocs actually are very they're able to cook and stuff. So that's always what's been so creepy, because they're definitely these bestial sort of things that have this just this hunger for humans, and that's kind of all they really eat. Anything, any living thing they'll eat, even themselves. but they will take time to cook it, which is always just kind of this weird thing because they don't have to cook it. They definitely will eat anything at any point, but they do use cook pots, which is a running thing in this world where everyone knows that they don't want to end up in a Trolloc cook pot. But yeah, they bust into the into Rand and Tam's house and basically start attacking.
I almost want like just like one scene sometime in the show of just like a Trolloc running out of a house with like a pot or a pan or something.
I hope we get it.
That would just
Because
be
I mean,
funny.
it's such a because they do. I think you're supposed to because even in these chapters they note how they have human eyes, and
Mhm.
so there's something of human left in some way, but it's you know not really human anymore. But
And one of the ones that Rand faces can speak, which is unusual.
right, yeah, the one that Rand is once I guess he basically gets trapped in the house with this one, and he kind of like pins him a little bit and he starts to talk a little bit, which is super strange. I don't think it's ever I don't think it's ever been heard of before. But yeah, he ultimately is killed by Rand. And we also learn here that Tam was a fighter of some sort, a soldier, a blade master, or at least a someone who knew the blade well enough to have a heron mark on it. Um, and we kind of get this whole sort of this battle that kind of breaks out in the house where while Tam is injured, there he's able to defend or kill enough of the Trollocs, and so Rand I think kills at least one, and they're able to escape. But Tam is injured, seemingly fatally in that attack, and so and this is it was kind of weird because when you get to this part in the story, it's just like I was kind of waiting, all that sort of slow build up, and I'm just kind of wondering what's going to happen. And then this whole thing kind of comes out of nowhere, where they're just like this slow, really slow point in the cottage or whatever, and then this sequence where Rand is taking Tam back to the village to get
Mhm.
help. It seems to go on for so long. It's such an interesting thing because during this time where he's got his horse Bella, he's using Bella and he's trying to get Tam back to Emmons Field.
Mhm.
He's also like barely avoiding groups of roaming Trollocs and Fades and that are looking for him. um and I just and the whole time Tam is like muttering these incoherent statements to Rand, and Rand starts to think that based on what Tam is muttering in his like fever dream after being, I guess, basically stabbed. I forget where he's exactly stabbed, but
He gets like
he
poison. It's like there's venom on the weapons of the Trollocs, right?
right,
So that's like part of it is that it's like it's it might have not have been like a deep enough wound to kill him, but like the Trolloc venom.
right, exactly. Because he was fine, and then he's not necessarily losing blood as much, but it's just like the actual venom or the poison on the blade starts to really take its toll on him. But yeah, he basically in his fever like talks and mutterings, he basically says that he makes Rand think that that he found Rand somewhere and brought him home. And it's not really confirmed here, but Rand starts to worry about that a little bit. Um, and basically denies it.
Yeah.
Originally when I read it, I didn't remember as much destruction to the village. But when I went back to reread these sections, uh I didn't realize it was as bad as it was there.
Mhm.
But yeah, so they get there and Rand's kind of like trying to get some help. He's looking for Egwene to try to help find Nynaeve, but then ultimately finds out that Nynaeve won't be able to heal or help Tam, and so he has to go to Moraine, who we learn is an Aes Sedai,
Mhm.
um, which I think is a interesting reveal. I don't know, how did you feel about learning like basically at this point I'm like, okay, this is the wizard, this is the Gandalf, right?
Mhm. Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's like they don't know until whatever happens in the village while Tam and Rand have their dramatic moment in like Back Up the Hill
Right.
that like she does something to fight off the Trollocs.
Mhm.
She summons down lightning, and that was like crazy to them. And they're like,
Right.
oh, so there's an Aes Sedai here. Which it seems like things are like too fast for, if I'm remembering correctly, for Rand to even really like care. Like he's just like, if she can help Tam, then that's fine. I can't believe I'm saying this, but like I'm
Right.
gonna have to like hope that she will help me. And that was
Right.
like, I feel like that's kind of just the start of it. But then you're like, what is an Aes Sedai? Like, what does this
Right.
mean? Like, I don't. You're just like, I don't know what that means. Like
It's
with
hard
your
to
first
tell, but
read.
they definitely set it up where you're worried about the one power that she's using. And like I think he mentions like being in the room with her as she uses it to heal Tam. It's just he felt weird, he felt kind of gross by it, but
Mhm.
at the end of the day, he was gonna, have that be the way if that was the only way, to
Mhm.
save his dad. But I think they do, the townspeople as well kind of get riled up by her being there, even though, she saves them, right? They kind of blame her for the attack.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess I could see that trajectory. I can understand their thought pattern there.
Mhm.
But why would she spend the time to save them, otherwise?
Oh, another thing of note from the destruction from the Trolloc attack is that it was very like targeted towards specific buildings, like in terms of
Mm,
like the structural damage.
right.
It was the blacksmith's house office.
Right.
I don't know why I'm
Yes.
like
The
the
smithy.
blacksmith. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, the Cawthon residence where
Correct.
Matt
Yeah.
is from, and obviously Rand's house.
Right.
Those are the only buildings that were specifically damaged, um,
Yeah.
which is a little, I guess, strange and of note.
Well, and that's interesting because it's, you know, we know from earlier that both Perrin, who is a blacksmith's apprentice, and Matt have also seen the Black Rider.
Mhm.
Um, and they both, were the ones that were targeted, at least they're where they would live. I think also parents, because parents, I think mostly lives in Emmons Field at the the blacksmith's shop. But I think his farm was actually attacked as well. I want to say, and I can't. I'm angry at myself for forgetting parents' master's last name.
Luhan?
The Luhans, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, they were attacked, and I love that they give like the fact that Master Luhan like actually does like do some damage to the Trollocs.
Yeah.
Um,
And
also,
Mistress.
yes, exactly. Um, and as well, Tom does too. They
Mhm.
do mention it. It's kind of a brief thing, but he takes out, Tom takes out a few of them too, which is notable.
Also, I know this is like way back. This is like the day before all this happens. Another strange thing about Moraine is that when she sees Matt, Perrin, and Rand hanging out, and like when she introduces herself to them, she gives them some silver dollars, silver coins,
Yeah,
and it's just
which
like,
they
here
all
you
keep.
go. And they
Yeah,
all are like, should we spend it now? And they all decide to save it for some reason. They don't know why,
right.
but they're like, I feel like I need to save it.
Some sort of pattern working, I guess.
Yeah, that's another thing we should probably bring up on this episode.
But basically Moraine tells them that they were targeted for a reason and that the Dark One is after them specifically, and is able to convince them to leave actually. So after she's healed Tam, she's already basically gotten Perrin and Matt on board, and tells Rand that we need to take you out of the village or they're going to come back and more in a bigger force and destroy everything, and really all they're looking for is them, so they wouldn't if they left the village. And you know as as much as Rand doesn't want to, he also doesn't want destruction to befall the village, so him and the two boys leave. But Egwene is able to figure out what they're doing and decides to tag along. And I love that Moraine's just like, initially she's just like, I don't think you should come. And then she's just like, Egwene's just like, no, I'm coming. And then she's like, okay, fine. It's just like there's not much resistance.
Yeah.
But she basically says that the pattern will, the wheel weaves as the wheel wills, and so Egwene is going to come if she wants to.
I feel like Lan gets like more annoyed because he's just like, this is more people I have to feed.
I know, exactly. I love how like he's just like grumpy for like most of these chapters.
Yeah. And then Tom decides to come.
Yeah.
I don't know why. He's just like, I'm coming. And it's just like, okay.
It's just a weird move because you would think, he doesn't want to be associated with Trollocs and Merge are all attacking. But yeah, he does go. So that's our party. We've got the group set up and they kind of just set off. And they really don't tell their family. I think they leave notes for their family members. But
I think only Egwene leaves a note, which like I think eventually annoys Moiraine because it like means that if someone got a hold of the note, like a dark friend, it could get back to them.
Yeah, I can't remember that part, but yeah, I thought they all did, but maybe you're right. Yeah, that makes sense though, because I guess you wouldn't, like exactly what you said, you wouldn't want to let them know where they're heading or that they're leaving, necessarily. But yeah, so that's kind of what we get, and then as they leave, I guess they do get somewhat attacked, I guess, by a drag car, which I don't know exactly that you get a good look at it, but essentially it's like a bat-like creature.
It's like a Batman.
It's like literally like a Batman. That can like lull you into a stupor, and but Moiraine summons some fog to help them escape, and that's kind of where we end for these first 10 chapters, where they get introduced to their adventure. And you kind of, at this point, you're just like, okay, I kind of see where we're going. And I was so invested at this point. I was kind of curious. I don't know, I was definitely curious, that's why I picked it up. But by the time you get to that attack on Rand's farm, I was just hooked from then on. And definitely the introduction of Moiraine and Lan really kept me engaged. So I really like this part.
Yeah. And I love like getting to know Mat, Rand, and Perrin and their dynamic. I feel like they like immediately kind of reminded me of like Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup, where Rand is Blossom, Perrin is Buttercup, and Mat is Bubbles. I think
that's fair.
And I was like, you know what? I love this.
Yeah.
My little
you get like all your favorite, like, and it's funny because I have characters that I gravitate towards in stories, and Mat, Perrin, and Rand are like all the types that I usually gravitate towards. So this book was just like, here's everything that you like, and here it is.
Yeah. And then I'm gonna throw in Egwene and Nynaeve, who are also just like incredible.
I think it's hard to get into Egwene yet, right? I think she gets more to do, spoiler alert, for the next chapters, but she gets introduced here, and I think reading it initially, I was just like, what's gonna happen here? And I was didn't know what to expect from her role. I definitely went into it completely blind, so I didn't really know what to get from her. So at this point, I was just really kind of curious about her and like skeptical about her involvement at this point. But yeah, I think that, and you get introduced to Nynaeve as well, who kind of casts a shadow on everything too. I don't know, we didn't really talk about her, her dynamic in the village, but I think it casts this, it's a weird character because it's a young woman who's in power, which is not something you see often. Yeah. And she's very aware of that and kind of self-conscious, particularly the age part. but she
Yeah.
seems to make up for it
In
in her
my
personality.
in my reread of it, I didn't realize that you don't actually really hear her speak until after the Winter Night attack when Rand's like, "Can you help
Right.
my dad?" And she's like, she's like, "Nope, this is too bad. You need to go to the
Yeah.
Ice to Die." That's like the first time you actually hear her talk, and everything else is just like the men complaining about her being bossy.
Right.
So you just like know that she's like in charge and a leader. And I don't know, some of the people feel a type of way about it or like begrudgingly follow her. So it makes me feel like she like must have like very recently became wisdom, and it's like kind of a
Yeah.
big like change. But yeah, you like just like hear about her like throughout the entire thing, or like I don't know, like Randall be like, "I hope Nynaeve doesn't find out." Like that's
Right.
like all you like really hear.
There's a profound fear. There's a profound fear of her that's like palpable throughout this whole first arc here,
Yeah.
which is definitely, you know, it's kind of interesting when you're like you said, when we first hear her, she's actually, you know, very reasonable and helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get her sort of stature in the village more up front before you actually get the real her, which is interesting.
Mhm. And it seems like she's not aware that Moraine spirits the kids all away either. Like at
Right.
the end of this, like you don't hear her like react to it. So I think that's like another thing. Is like this all happens and she doesn't know.
Right. And she's the leader of the village, so I imagine she's going to be not very happy about this. Um, but yes, I think that's pretty much it. And I guess the other part we should touch on is Pattern Fane. We
Mhm.
did talk about that he gives some information, but you know, this guy is a character that is of note, I think, just because his his demeanor here is it intrigued me then, and I think it's just notable a character to kind of think about as we go forward.
We also haven't really talked that much about Tom Maryland yet.
Right. I love this character, and I definitely like his introduction. I think there's something about his. We were this is a behind the scenes sort of look at the you know, Great Honey podcast, but we were trying to figure out a good quote to pull for him, and but it's like it's not even the quote that he doesn't actually give a good story. He basically teases the story, and I remember reading it and thinking like, oh man, yeah, he does give a good story here. He's like, no, he gives a good teaser for a story, which is like this is a perfect way to kind of explain this character because he's just so enticing that even though you're not getting what you actually thought or what you might pay for, you're actually entertained. And he's just a dynamic character.
He's like, "Oh, I've
So
got stories."
yeah, he's really I really like this character. So
Yeah.
I was glad when he tagged along. Sometimes you get introduced to a cool character and they just kind of leave him behind. So I was
Mhm.
kind of glad when they brought him.
His description in the book kind of like made me feel like he's kind of creepy though, just because like I don't know, something about the mustaches blowing when he
Right.
talks just like kind of grossed me out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I'm
one
glad
that's one show
I'm
change
glad
I'm
they
glad they
updated.
did.
They had to do something. Like there was a lot of people upset about the mustaches not being in the show version, but I mean, there's too much attention honestly paid to the to mustaches in the book.
Yeah, it's like I really don't want to see them flapping around. Like I'm good.
Blowing in the wind. He's like always like knuckling them. Um, but yeah, so that's the first part of this story, and it kind of just, you know, you get swept away in the adventure of, and I think it does a good job of setting up the idea that these people don't want to go on an adventure. Not really. Maybe Gwen, but none of them really want to travel outside of their, you know, the life that they live. And that was kind of Robert Jordan's goal, at least in interviews I've seen him give about this. He just wanted a story where people were annoyed about having to like go and say go and like do some adventure. They want to just live their life.
Like the farthest these people travel is maybe to another like village within the Two Rivers like district,
Right.
But even then, they don't really want to do that. Some of the places like Tar and Ferry are kind of seedy.
Yeah.
Like, hold your purse close to you in Tar and Ferry. Like, that's like how they are.
They note that a few times how it's like
Yeah.
a kind of a shady place, and they're just got to be wary when you go out there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I don't know. How are you feeling about we're like doing the big step now. It's kind of intimidating talking about the books with everybody.
It is. It's a lot. I mean, these are huge books that in some cases have a tremendous amount of stuff to go over. And this one does. We were thinking about doing a larger section of this, but it ended up being smarter, I think, or at least more convenient for us to do a lesser portion at a time. But I'm excited because I think there's just so much to pull from these, and I'm actually really interested to see your takes on some of these aspects of the book. So this is just the beginning. It gets only better from here.
Thank you for joining us for our 5th episode of The Great Honey. Find us on Instagram and Twitter as @GreatHoneyPod, Doug Great Honey on TikTok, and The Great Honey anywhere you can find podcasts, as well as on YouTube. We'll be releasing the episodes every Wednesday, and until then, see you around.